Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast with the spotlight on section hikers.
And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, the premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers, and I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart. Before we get to the heart of today's episode, I wanted to give all of you a huge welcome to episode 100. Yep, episode 100. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening, all of my guests for coming on the show, Paul Collins, or you all know him as Skunk Ape, for helping with all of the social media artwork, and to all of you that have donated to the Hiking Radio Network, which helps with the production of our shows, and last but not least, to our awesome producer of all of our shows on the Hiking Radio Network, Steve Mighty Blue Adams. It takes a team to keep these episodes going, and I'm glad all of you are on that team. Co-host Austin Wallis is back with me this week and next week as we begin our talks about PTS, or post-traumatic stress. Austin has mentioned in previous episodes that he serves in the military and also works as a first responder. For this week's show, Austin defines what PTS means for him, who PTS affects, and begins to share how he copes with his own PTS. Thanks for joining us this week. Happy 100th episode. And now on to my guest co-host, Austin Wallis. Hey, Austin. Or wait a minute. Guest co-host Austin, welcome back to the podcast.
What's going on?
I still can't get over co-host or guest co-host.
Co-host sounds, it just flows a little better, I think.
It flows a little better. Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome back to the show, co-host Austin.
Great to be here.
So listen, you guys, Austin and I are getting ready to speak about a particular topic that we have led into before. And I also said I was going to unveil a career that I worked very hard to maybe go into, but I never did. And first and foremost, I want everybody to know, of course, 100%, this is a hiking podcast. And we talk about hiking and section hiking and all the wonderful things that go with that. But for all of you out there, we also, the majority of us, spend the majority of our lives in what we normally call the 9-to-5, our careers, busy with our families and all those wonderful things. And a lot of times, those are the things that lead us to the hiking. So with Austin today, I just wanted to lead into that. We may not be talking a ton about hiking, but we're leading into what has led Austin to his hiking side of business or his hiking career. So with all of that being said, Austin, let's go back to the end of our last episode and kind of share with folks how we ended that, and then we'll lead into this. That was a tough thing. So
yeah, because we talked, or I guess we ended the episode talking about why we hike, things that get us out there. One of the first episodes that you and I recorded together, I talked about coming back from Afghanistan and going on my first solo backpacking trip. So that's how we ended it. But I guess we'll get kind of personal on this because it's going to be probably the most personal I've ever gotten on any internet forum or social media or anything like that. But a little background on me. I've been wearing an Army uniform, been in the Army for just over 18 years, still serving in the North Carolina National Guard.
Thank you for your service, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. During that 18 years, I've had 2 combat tours. I was when I was in Iraq in 06, 07, I was a scout platoon leader. And then about 7 months later, I left and went to Afghanistan. And in 2009, I was an infantry company advisor for Afghan infantry company. So that was my military experience. And then for the past 8 years, I've been a first responder here in Raleigh. So kind of had I've worn a couple of different uniforms, but definitely have experienced a few things that have shown me that the trail definitely has some therapeutic qualities to it.
And my other co-host, Carissa Hipp, she and I have been talking about, the healing power of nature and getting out there and some different mindfulness practices. And one of the things that I spoke about in the beginning of my interview with Hawk a couple weeks ago is all hikers seem to know the term post-trail depression. Sure. And I know 100% that whenever I get back from an amazing trip or an amazing section hike, or whether the hike was amazing or not, case in point with Job Muir Trail, I guess you would call it, suffer from post-trail depression. And
sure.
And that looks different for every hiker. Which leads me to asking you, because I don't have something called PTS, which is post-traumatic stress, but you do.
Yes.
And the only way I can relate it is kind of on the fashion of post-trail depression. Missing the trail, wanting that lifestyle, being out there. But PTS has its own definition. So relating that over, I guess, since you suffer from PTS, but there's also PTSD.
And I think for the purposes of this podcast, like, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a guy that talks to a camera for fun. But so there's actually a clinical definition for post-traumatic stress. And that's the stress that immediately follows some type of triggering event. And then what separates, at least in this clinical definition, what separates post-traumatic stress from the post-traumatic stress disorder is time. So anything that lasts longer than 30 days, the psychology community, I guess, considers that PTSD. And then anything that's less than 30 days is post-traumatic stress. I'm not a big fan of calling anything PTSD. And I've listened to a few podcasts where Benny Braden, Plug It In, talks about his post-traumatic stress and his journey through that. He's the same way. He doesn't like calling it PTSD. And I like his reason too, so I'm going to totally steal it. But the post-traumatic stress is an injury that someone has suffered. And so in my mind, it's not necessarily a disorder. If you break your femur, we don't call that an upper leg disorder. It's an injury.
All right, you call it a break of the femur. Right. Yeah, I broke my leg.
And so, I like to call it, or I prefer calling it post-traumatic stress because I do view it as an injury. It's something that has been caused by things that I have gone through in my life personally. And I also think that, especially in the military cultures and in the first responder cultures, there's a stigma that can be attached to calling something a disorder, if you got PTSD or whatever. And so there could be some hesitance for people to even admit that they have something like this or are suffering from it, just because it's a disorder. They don't want to acknowledge that they have a disorder. And so, yeah, but my caveat is that I'm just a guy. There's probably some mental health professionals out there that are just cringing because whatever I'm saying is totally wrong. But that's just the way I feel about it. So,
well, let me ask you this, because I do have some questions. Who does PTS affect exactly? Who gets PTS?
I think everyone manages stress differently. Everyone has stress, whether you're a first responder, whether you're military, whether you're an insurance salesman, everyone has stress, and we all deal with it differently. When I talk about post-traumatic stress today, I'm not talking about like the normal wear and tear of life, working long hours, stressing about finances, relationship issues. The triggering events or the incidents that I'm talking about that cause post-traumatic stress for the purposes of today are outside of the normal range of human experience. Things that most people hopefully will never experience in their life. And so for post-traumatic stress, anybody can have that. If you have some type of traumatic event where you're in a car crash or your house burns down or something like that, you don't necessarily have to be a specific demographic to have post-traumatic stress. So we all deal with it in our own way. But I'm kind of focusing on it with the military and the first responder aspect because one, that's how it affects me. But I think that for the purposes of our conversation today, dealing with post-traumatic stress and managing it day to day, and how the trail or how we incorporate the trail into that.
Well, one of the things I find interesting, because you guys, Austin sends me awesome show notes, things that we can go through. You sent me a fact from the internet. It says an average person may experience 1 or 2 traumatic events in their lifetime. A law enforcement officer, a first responder, someone that's in EMT, military, they're likely to experience 800 events in an average 20-year career.
Yeah.
Now, this will lead me into my hidden career that I never went into. Is I actually went to EMT school and became a certified EMT in the state of North Carolina. And one of the things that you have to do to become an EMT, and then further on, way back then, it was EMT defibrillator, and they do all that now within the EMT program. And then moving on to paramedic school, is you have to spend some time in a trauma 1 hospital. And I had to do 2 different 12-hour shifts in a trauma 1 emergency room. And the first thing I saw was an ATV accident with a 16-year-old that didn't have a helmet on. And I was just, I can't do this. I did finish the program. I did keep up my certification. I actually do help students at my school that want to go into EMT. I help them follow the path, whether they want to be firefighters and so on. But that event right there, I said, I can't do this. I can't see this. And I just often wonder what would have happened if they wouldn't have made us go through that clinical or whatever they call it now. So I can relate on a very, 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 very small scale based on what you do now, serving our country and as a first responder. So that statistic is startling. 800 events in a 20-year career. I can't imagine.
I'd have to say, anybody can make up a fact and throw it on the internet. But I'd say that's probably close to accurate. If you think about what a first responder, if you're EMS, if you're a police officer, you're a firefighter, the things that you see on a regular basis, we heavy on the first responder stuff right now, but in the military, I think the military post-traumatic stress can be more event focused. So if you're overseas and you experience, you have a IED, a roadside bomb, or a firefight, or you have a friend that's injured or killed, those are all triggering events. I think that event-based post-traumatic stress is probably easier to identify. It's focused around something that you can sink your teeth into. But the difference with the first responder post-traumatic stress, there's actually a term for it. It's called cumulative PTS or cumulative PTSD. And that's just what we just talked about, that 800 traumatic events over a career. And you think about, first responders, you're usually not coming into contact with people on their best day. It's usually something that they're going to remember for the rest of their life, whether that's a police officer going to a domestic dispute, taking somebody to jail, firefighter going to a house fire, EMS working on a traumatic injury. Like, those are things that they do every day. But if your house burns down or you're in a car crash where you have to go to the hospital, you're going to remember that forever. But that's just another Tuesday for them.
Right. And here you have events, because you mentioned for military, it can be events, but you also have some examples here. I'm just looking at these as an educator. Sexual assault victims, some juveniles, all sorts of different fatalities, traumatic injuries, foot chases, fights, officer-involved shootings, heightened awareness wherever you are, that hypervigilance on and off duty, working holidays, missing family events. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. The way I kind of look at it, and I wrote down a little snippet story that I found on the internet that kind of helps kind of drive it home. So I'll just, if it's good, I'll just read it.
Go for it.
So Joe the soldier goes to Iraq, and his convoy is hit by an IED, or an improvised explosive device. Several soldiers are injured or killed. Joe lost his leg and part of his hearing, and now he has been sent home on a medical discharge. Every time he hears a loud noise, he's immediately taken back in his mind to the exact moment when that bomb went off. This is post-traumatic stress. That's a hard thing to deal with, but here's the positive side to it. Joe can now seek professional help and tell his story, pinpointing exactly what's causing his post-traumatic stress. Now he's on the road to recovery. Now take Bob, the police officer, a 10-year officer at his department. Bob's on his 6th straight day of work without a day off because his department is shorthanded. And on top of that, he has to work overtime for 3 of those days because of late reports he's had to finish. During this time, he's missed his son's championship baseball game that was out of town. Because Bob works night shift and his wife works day shift, he's had to help with the household and the children and has only gotten 4 hours of sleep each day. To top it all off, Bob has responded to a rape, a domestic battery of a wife, a house where 3 children were not being fed, and 2 fatality vehicle crashes. Suddenly, Bob developed symptoms and signs of post-traumatic stress. His wife discusses it with him, and he decides to seek help. The first question the therapist asks Bob is, what traumatic event caused you to have this sudden change? And there's absolutely no way Bob can answer that question with the utmost certainty. Sure, there's a particular call he responded to that sticks out in his mind, but taking the totality of the circumstances, what truly caused his break and how can it be treated? And so that's what we're talking about with cumulative post-traumatic stress. It's an injury. And so with the military, that injury can be like a stab wound. It's immediate, it's easily identifiable, but that cumulative stress is like taking sandpaper to your skin, and you're just slowly wearing it away. And so it's still, both are nasty wounds, but very different.
So for you, I do have a question, and this, with things being cumulative and you just reading this, was there a certain point, where you said, hey, the outdoors is awesome for me. Hiking is awesome for me. Did it, and we're going to talk more about this on the next episode, how being outdoors and hiking helps you with this. And I just want everybody to know, by no means, I mean, Austin and I are just having a conversation. And first of all, I want to say, Austin, thank you for sharing, because this is not easy by any means whatsoever. And, I told Austin that there's people out there that probably need to hear this, because, we talk about hiking a lot, and, hiking is so wonderful, but there's reasons people go hiking. I mean, Earl Schaefer on the Appalachian Trail, he was walking off the war. I mean, that is very open and evident, and he's talked about that. And I never thought I had post-trail depression. Like, I was like, I don't have that. I'd just go back to work and this, that, or the other. So, and I'm not relating post-trail depression to PTS at all.
But there's still things that we all experience. So I think it's still relevant to talk about.
So was there a point where you said, oh, I think I might have this? Or how does that work? How do you figure this out?
It's a slow burn. For me personally, it was not something that was just like on Monday, I didn't have it. And on Tuesday, I could say, oh, yeah, this is definitely there.
Well, I have it this morning.
Yeah. But no, it was something that I didn't really see in myself for a long time. And then it was also a slow burn, realizing what the outdoors does to help with that. And it's still a journey. I'm not there by any means, but it's been within the last few years that I've really been able to identify that being outdoors, being on the trail, sitting in a kayak and paddling, those are things that help me to manage it, and to be able to function both at work and at home. It's definitely something that helps. So,
well, and like we said before, I mean, we spend, I don't know, as section hikers, we probably spend 90% of our time working, being at home, being with family, and 10% out on the trails that we really want to.
Right.
And we, in our minds, we really want to do the opposite. We want to be 10%, here in the reality of things, and 90% out on the trails and doing things and that we want to. And does dreaming and planning trips, does that kind of stuff help?
Oh yeah. I mean, that was one of having my YouTube channel allows me to be on the trail even when I'm not on the trail. I'm still eyeballs deep in John Muir Trail footage, editing JMT videos. But it's like being able to relive all of those experiences through the media that I'm able to capture. And the therapeutic benefits of nature are not revolutionary by any means. I think everyone can identify with how being outdoors makes them feel, and escaping from the daily hustle and bustle. But I think that for me specifically, managing the post-traumatic stress, I think that there's some intrinsic value to it that for me goes beyond just managing stress, and it's a medication in and of itself.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so let's leave that there, because the listeners know, because I'm going to say this in my intro, that we are doing part 1 and part 2. So for this, you've kind of defined for us what PTS is to you, who PTS affects, and, some event examples of, things that are going on out there. And my hope is that we help somebody, who's listening, who does need to go and get out in nature, whether, section hiking, day hiking, whether it's going out in your own backyard and smelling the grass.
Yes.
So, but I know you have, we'll kind of end this episode before we go on to the next one. I know you have something you want to read us.
Yeah. And it's, again, it's 100% stolen from someone else, but I've got permission from the author. So this was written by my brother, maybe last year, and he even made a video about it. So I think I sent you the link. Maybe we'll put that in the show notes.
You did, and I'm going to make sure that is in there because it's great.
Oh, I love it watching it. I still watch it over and over again. But here we go. Anyways, it's called "Why Do We Go to the Wilderness?" First, we should ask, why don't people go to the wilderness? Well, some say it's too hot, or it's too cold, or it's too wet. There's no electricity. There's no internet. It's really hard and a lot of exercise. There are animals, bugs. There aren't any showers or running water or toilets. So why do we go to the wilderness? Because there are places on this planet, thousands of them, places that are hidden from the everyday world, places that only those who dare to seek them out will ever see. You usually can't get there by car. These places are elusive and hard to get to. They challenge us physically and mentally. These places present risk, danger, and discomfort. They're scary because they are at all times in control, and you're not. But still, these places beckon us. Only by venturing into the wilderness, away from modern comforts, are we able to calibrate the meaning of necessity. What is it that we truly need as humans, and what do we merely desire? Wilderness allows us to shed our daily trappings so that we can find mental quietness and self-reflection. The wilderness draws us out of our comfort zone so that we can grow. The wilderness reminds us of where we fit in, and in doing so, brings us closer to our Creator. But here's the ironic miracle. By venturing into this raw, untamed space, we learn to value and cherish the blessings we have. The juicy burger on the way home, the warm bed, refreshing air conditioning, hot showers. Why do we go to the wilderness? Why wouldn't we? So, yeah, I think he
nailed it.
He nailed it exactly. I mean, that encapsulates everything. I think we can all identify with that in one way or another, as to why we all are drawn to the outdoors.
I love it. And Austin, I've told everybody you're coming back next week, so you'll join me again, right?
I hope so.
All right, you guys, we'll be back next week.
See you then.
I truly appreciate Austin being willing to share about his coping with post-traumatic stress. I would like to say a huge thank you to all of you that serve or have served in our military, and to those that have worked or are currently working as first responders. If any of you out there know of anyone that might be suffering with PTS, invite them on a hike and share why you love your favorite trail. Next week, Austin will be back as he continues to share some of his tactics for dealing with PTS and resources available to those that are interested. The resources that we go over in next week's episode are also available in today's show notes for your reference. If you have an interest in being on the podcast, I am currently looking for new Section Hiker guest and Section Hiker co-host for 2022. Send me an email to jester@jestersectionhiker.com and share a little bit about yourself and why you want to be a guest or a co-host with me on the show. As always, you can go to hikingradionetwork.com and click on the Jester Section Hiker Show to find all of today's show notes, pictures, and links mentioned in this episode. If you find value in what we do here at the network, please consider leaving us a donation by clicking on any one of the donate buttons found on our website. And be sure to let us know why you love our shows. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be safe out there and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Hello, Saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.